Top of the morning to you, everybody. Hey, listen, you know the deal. Hit like and subscribe, and let's get after it. Hi, hello, and welcome to your bi-weekly dose of average to goodness. Call it what you want. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Charlie Davies. And great news, Big Tones, Tony Miola, got some great news from his doctor. He should be back on the show next week. He's going to be with us in LA. So things are on the up and up for Big Tones, and we're very excited to welcome him back on the show when he returns. And we fully expect everybody to give him his flowers. We love you, Tones. All right. That's first. Second, we got a nice show, Chuck. We got a lot to talk about, talking about dual nationals, which is going to be interesting. Recruiting them. Do we need to anymore? How should we do it if we want them? How's that all going to work? We're going to talk about that. We're gonna Americans abroad. We got a weekend preview, guys. This is like their last audition before they can get called into the national team, because the roster should be dropping early next week, is what I'm hearing, which is pretty cool. And then we can talk about some news around the world that's going to pertain to the U.S. in particular. Should be a lot of fun. Now, Chuck, I should say we have a disclaimer as well, because we're recording this before the Thursday's UEFA action for everybody listening later on. So we're not going to have any Tanner Tessman news against Steaua Bucharest and Lyon, and then Real Betis versus Vitoria is.
There you go.
So I'm working on it. I'm a gringo. Raise my hand, except that I can't get every pronunciation right, but I'm trying. Okay, so Chuck, let's start here, and where I want to go is with the dual nationals. And we have two in particular that are playing in the Bundesliga that have everybody rightfully hyped up. Damion Downs, 10 goals and 2 assists, playing for Cologne in the second Bundesliga, scored against Bayer Leverkusen in the DFB Pokal. And Cologne dropped off a little bit in the second Bundesliga, though the top 5 teams are separated by 1 point. So they still got plenty of time to get into the promotion spot. And then you have Noahkai Banks, the 18-year-old who just signed an contract extension with Augsburg, in and out of the lineup, but 18 years old, 6'4", absolute beast. Damion Downs is also 6'4". So they're about twice your size, Chuck. I don't know if these guys, but with these two in particular. Now, you mentioned Damion Downs was on was on the peripheral of potentially being called into our Olympic team, didn't make it.
Right.
Do you think he gets called into this Nations League camp, especially because we're thin at the number 9 spot?
I wouldn't be surprised to see his name on the list, because look at the depth chart for the striker position. Of players playing in Europe, players playing in MLS, and their age and what they have to offer, and what Pochettino can maybe do with those players. And I look at a player like Damion Downs, who's 20 years old, and is he ready now? That's probably debatable to say. Probably not. But is it worth bringing him in to see scoring 9 goals and 4 assists in Bundesliga 2 at 20 years old? Probably, given the alternative is you're looking at a Brian White, who is in his late 20s. Probably not. We've seen probably not at the level to push the U.S. men's national team forward in that department. I think he's done a great job in MLS, and this season in particular. I think Vancouver is a strong move for him, but I don't think Brian White has much potential left to realize, right? Whereas Damion Downs, you can come in and say, okay, he's got a good body of work, good foundation, and now we can build off of that. So if you're looking at the depth chart after Josh Sargent, Timothy Weah can play there, but not your prototypical number 9. Haji Wright can play there, but has played primarily on the left wing and has excelled there in the championship. After that, you got Brandon Vasquez, who hasn't really produced this season in MLS, hasn't kicked on the way that you would need to kind of show that Pochettino is show that you're the right guy for Pochettino.
Mm-hmm.
And so after that, it's slim pickings, no?
Okay, so just so I'm clear, Brian White's hit his ceiling, right? You just think this is it. This is as good as we're going to see. So sorry, Brian White. Sucks to be you. Chuck thinks you hit your ceiling. You're out.
That doesn't mean you're not a good player.
I know. Yeah. I'm trying to sit you out. I'm trying to trigger you. Just me and you. I'm trying to trigger Chuck. You got close. I can feel some energy there from you. The trigger energy. Okay, and then Brandon Vasquez, yes, hasn't kicked on with Austin. Slow start. And hasn't had that presence that you expected him to kick on with. So Haji, right? Is it too soon for him coming back from an injury to bring him in?
It might be, yes.
Okay. Yeah, and then Daryl Dike, obviously, just to throw him into the equation, he's coming back from a significant Achilles injury. So
right,
and you haven't seen him, and he hasn't done enough.
He would need another year.
Yeah, I agree.
And he wasn't even at that level yet to make an impact.
That's true. And Haji's not even on the preliminary roster. But I guess I just wanted to throw him in there as a conversation piece. Yeah. Okay, so then you have Damion Downs, 20 years old, 6'4", gives us a different type of presence too. I think, right? A different look. Mm-hmm. The guy's super dynamic, can get in behind, can hold the ball up. Obviously he's still trying to get consistent in that space, right? And kind of knowing when to do what and how. Not that he's got the how, more like the when. But Chuck, about a month ago, you were a little bit down on Downs, and now you are a little bit more perked up, even though he hasn't scored in his last three. Not to say that's a slump per se, because it happens for strikers. But
you got to look at the situation, Jimmy.
Okay.
Right now, you don't have the players that you need available. Right, Ricardo Pepi is
right. A month ago,
Flair and Balogun are A1 and A2. Those are A1 and A2.
Balogun back in training for Monaco, by the way. That's great news.
Yes.
Anyway, keep going.
But that's A1, A2. And then there's a big drop off, and then there's Josh Sargent right there, and then there's a massive drop off, a cliff. So now the situation has changed. If you had Ricardo Pepi and Balogun available in full health and there's playing, you're not calling in anyone after Josh Sargent. And Josh Sargent is even on the line of getting called in or not. Does he deserve to get called in? Yes. But you're not playing if you have Balogun and Pepi in front of you. So now that Josh Sargent is the number one, given his body of work and given the availability of other strikers that he's competing with, now you say, okay, who do we see a future with at this point? And Josh Sargent is probably going to get most of the playing time because there's not someone that's pressing him for minutes. So in that case, why wouldn't you take a shot with Damion Downs, given that he's dual national, given that he's 20 years old, given that he's had success at the Bundesliga 2 club?
Yeah, and of course, if they get promoted, if they can find their way back into the top spots in the second Bundesliga, that's only going to help his cause, especially moving forward into the next year as things get a little bit tighter. Squeaky bum time to try to make that U.S. men's national team roster for 2026, which obviously, we're hosting. I don't know if it's actually hit me that we're hosting the World Cup. Like, we talk about it enough, but to really sit with it and go, holy, it's coming here. It's wild. It blows my mind, and I'm really excited about it. Okay, another player that we should discuss, center backs. Maybe I'll take my turn on this one as a resident defender here on the show. Noahkai Banks, 18 years old, born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and actually started his kind of athletic career with handball, I think, and then moved over to, he was 9 or 10 and then made the move. But he has been, since then, growing rapidly, always playing a couple years up and then finally getting a look with the first team and holding his own. And he actually had a quote, which I thought was pretty interesting as he started to emerge as a real prospect. He said, "I don't put any pressure on myself. I've been playing football since I was little, and I'm confident in my abilities. I try to read as little as possible about my achievements. I dribble forward more often now." Speaking about his own game, there's no fixed trigger. It depends on the individual game situation. If we can bypass the first chain in this way, then we are happy to take the opportunity. I've developed and improved significantly. It was quite an adjustment for me in the professional team. I've improved in the penalty area defense. I've also become more clever in my tackling. So he sounds like, when I see him speak, when I super steady, and which I think is an important quality for any center back at any age. This kid's 18, and I love the way that he moves already. Yes, he's a little bit over aggressive at times, normal for a young defender. At times he looks a little nervous on the ball, normal for a new defender. But when I think about the other, like the instinctual stuff, it's almost like when he has too much time to think, Chuck, that's when he runs himself into trouble. Have
you ever had that That type of.
Oh yeah, it took me like 10 years to figure that out, and that's why I'm a late bloomer and didn't get my first call up into the national team until I was 28. So yes, he's got. I mean, it took me a long time to learn how to get out of my own way, which I think is an art in itself. And it seems like every player has to go through this. It's just part of the development cycle. How do you get out of your own way? And if things aren't going your way, how do you correct that so that basically this, how can you minimize your lows and maximize your highs? Right. And I think that pendulum swings really hard when you're young. The highs are high and the lows are low. And then as you become a little bit more,
tell me about it.
Right. And when you become a little bit more mature and you understand a little bit about what you want to get out of each particular game or each situation, then the highs, you can try to maximize those and keep the lows at a minimum. And that takes time. And so when I think about, in terms of one of the prospects I'm most excited about, Noahkai Banks is super high up the list, especially from a defensive player. We look at him and go, okay, we finally got this prospect who could potentially push out any of the older guys that are currently in the national team pool. I don't know if he's going to be ready yet, but I'd love to see him kind of in with the group. And looking forward, when I project maybe 2030, he should be in the conversation. I'm going to put air quotes around should be, because a lot of things can happen in life, as you know, Chuck, that can derail you from what you're trying to achieve.
So I want to put this on your plate. Okay, you got 23 players. Yeah, you got 23 players. Okay, three have to be goalkeepers for the Nations League.
Okay.
In terms of this preliminary list, right? For forwards, given that you don't have available Balogun, you don't have Pepe available, right? So you have Josh Sargent, who is clearly striker one.
Okay.
Of these possibilities, who are you bringing in? You. I'm not saying you're Pochettino. I'm not saying if you're the coach, if you're the manager, who are you bringing in?
Yeah, I'm looking at the list right now.
Okay.
Wait,
Patrick
I can only
Gajiman,
bring okay.
Cole Campbell at the number 9 position. Okay. Patrick Gajiman, Cole Campbell, Damion Downs, Jesus Ferreira, Jordan Morris, Brandon Vasquez, Brian White.
I get 2 out of that.
You got 2.
So there's a lot of known quantities here, and I think that Ajimang falls into that because he just saw him in the January camp.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say in because he hasn't had the electrifying start to MLS either, and so Damion Downs for
Cole
sure.
Campbell would get a look here?
No, I don't.
No.
I think Damion Downs for sure. He'd be one of the 2. Now I'm just trying to think about the second option. Brandon Vasquez, he's already seen in multiple camps, so he knows. I don't know if he's been around Jordan Morris, J-Mo Smooth or not. I don't know if he's seen enough or doesn't think he
Jordan
fits
Morris,
or whatever.
Jordan Morris has performed
camp?
the best domestically of that group.
Yes, but I feel like there was something that we said after the January camp or after those 2 games. Has Ajimang done enough to get a look with the full team? Can you just bring him in and see how he does? If you're not going to play that second, whatever, that number 2 striker, number 3 at this point, if you're going to go elsewhere, then I would potentially take a flyer. I would rather take a flyer. I'd rather take a flyer on a younger player. If you're going to play, if you just want to see how somebody's going to fit in, then a known quantity. If you already know, listen, we're going to hype up that this is the last weekend for all these guys, as we should, right? It really is. But I think as a coaching staff, you already know who you're bringing in. I don't think one weekend is going to determine the last 90 minutes. Maybe this is the spot. If Ferreira or Jordan Morris scores 4 goals and you're like, shit, we got. I mean, how can we not call this guy? Okay, then maybe that flips. But I already think they have their minds made up with regard to that. So I get the sense that Ajimang, I would bring in a younger player, and that one that you demonstrated they've got a little bit of promise. If you surround him with the first team, what does that look like? So I would say Damion Downs, obviously another younger player, and Ajimang. That means you're probably going to commit some minutes to these players. So But that's the risk, right? I mean, that's what we're doing. But ultimately, the bulk of the responsibility is going to fall on other players. And let's say this, just so it's out there, it doesn't mean you necessarily will play Damion Downs or Ajimang if you bring him in, because we've already talked about other options at the number 9, right? You could throw a false nine up there. You can put Tim Way up there, who's very comfortable in that spot. So it's not like,
Jimmy,
yeah.
I got to tell you something. I never thought I'd see Ivis Gallersep get triggered in the chat. My man finally
got him.
Triggered. We got him. He got triggered. I think it was Matt Christopher.
Cole Campbell?
Hey, congrats, Dalton and Matt Christopher finally triggered Ivis Gallersep.
we got him.
Hey, you guys took down a legend. You hooked a Free Willy. I'm talking. You guys
you got a whale. You got a whale there.
You got a whale with that one. Woo! Good job,
we got
chat.
him. We got him. Nice job, chat. Nice job.
I was waiting for you guys to trigger Ivis. You guys finally did it. Well done. I just thought he was untouchable.
he was an invincible like Arsenal in 2004. Okay, so let's pivot a little bit and talk about American-born players who are now declaring to play elsewhere. Obviously, we're talking about dual nationals that we're looking to bring in with Banks and Damion Downs. But let's talk about some American-born players who've gone elsewhere. I mean, I guess Noel Buck is one. He's played for England's U19s, U20s. You have Baraktarevic, Esmir Baraktarevic, who just made the decision to leave the U.S. to go play for Bosnia Herzegovina.
And then he moved to PSV after that too, by the way.
That's true. He did. He moved to PSV. Noah Allen just committed to Greece. Obed Vargas, Mexico. Julian Araujo, Mexico. Efrain Alvarez. Jonathan Gomez, Ayo Akinola went from U.S. to Canada. I know that you can speak onto Baraktarevic and Noel Buck and his New England Revolution players. What are your thoughts on players leaving the States to go find opportunities elsewhere?
Well, Noel Buck wasn't ready, and I think in his mind thought he was ready because he had a run of, 5-6 games, and all of a sudden he thought he should be called into the U.S. men's national team, and he made it known and almost had this arrogance about him and left to go play with the under-19s in England, thinking that if you're not going to get called up to the U.S., what in the world makes you think you're going to get called up to England? He wasn't ready. Right. You got great potential. And I've seen him as a young academy kid with the Revs, when I was playing back in the day, all the way up to where he is now. And he finally got a run, got a couple of good goals and some good matches, and all of a sudden thought he was ready for the prime time. And it doesn't work that way. You gotta take the next steps. You don't go from here to there. And Esmir Baraktarevic, I think he just felt wrong. And one of the people that we didn't have on the screen that should have been on the screen is Nevin Subotic. So he was a dual national, and that's
one of the all-timers.
One of the all-timers, because I took him up. He went to Boston College on an official visit, and I was this host, and I was trying to recruit him, and I knew all about him playing on the youth national team. And I remember Thomas Rongen, I think, cut him from the under-20 World Cup.
He did.
And at that, he chose to go to USF. So obviously I didn't do a good job hosting him.
Terrible job.
And he goes on to have an incredible, stellar career, club and country, but primarily with Dortmund, right, as a star center back. And that was a big loss. I remember thinking, damn, we messed up as a dual national. But, that was one of those instances where I think Baraktarevic felt the same way. Man, they didn't select me for the Olympic team. I have a lot of qualities. You could see the potential. The kid he's got something different, right? Individual brilliance, can dribble, right? He has something different that most of our player pool don't have. Yet we couldn't harness that, and we couldn't keep him patient enough because he was so itching to get onto the first team level. Because once you kind of get exposed to it, you want that, right? He started in January camp, and he never gave him. I think the U.S. men's national team never gave him that carrot to chase. Right. It was almost
like a proper path to the first.
And so that for me, that's one that, okay, he probably wasn't ready, but in the future he would have been. He had a super high ceiling. His potential was great, and you could see at PSV he's had some sniffs, and he looks pretty damn good. So I think when you compare Noel Buck and Esmir Baraktarevic, Esmir was in a different stratosphere than Noel Buck. So
Yeah.
it's almost not even worth talking about Noel Buck. Maybe it's a reminder for parents and for players who are coming up through the system not to go head over heels for a performance that you maybe had in one game to all of a sudden think that you're ready, that you made it, when you gotta be patient and take the right steps.
Yeah, we could have a whole show on player path development and the expectations of both player and parents. And we probably should have a dedicated show on that one time. I think that would be pretty informative for our audience. I think one of maybe our all-timers that got away is Giuseppe Rossi. And imagine if he had played for us.
But do you fault Giuseppe Rossi?
No, I don't. I don't fault any of them.
Right, no, but it's not so much fault. But look at Giuseppe Rossi's situation. That's different. He grew up in Jersey, but he identified as an Italian American, right? His dream was to play in Italy, to play in Europe. So if the Italian national team, all of a sudden when he was 16, 17, 18, were saying, you're not good enough, you're not going to play, he's going to play for the U.S.
Right,
but
right.
The Italian national team goes, this guy is brilliant. He's at Manchester United. Yeah, we want you. We want you to commit, and we're going to bring you in. So there's a difference. And you could go to dual nationals like Jermaine Jones. If Germany wanted to play him, he would have played for Germany. He wouldn't have been playing for the U.S. Right. So you look at certain players in their positions. If it's a choice between the U.S. and the choice between the country that they're playing in, or the better, so-called better country that has a better chance of winning a World Cup, more chances than not, they're probably going to choose the other country. Although you look at Yunus Musa, he could have chose England. He could have chose Italy. He could have waited and been patient if they said you're not ready yet, and he chose to go with the U.S. So it's all about, I guess, the player at that time, if they're ready to take that step.
So Luca Coglioscio, playing for Burnley, could play for us, is electing to explore his other opportunities. You have Jonathan David, who could have played for us, your favorite striker of the world, Chuck, elected to play for Canada. We had Jonathan Gomez written. It's Jonathan Gonzalez is who we were thinking about. And Jogo, remember when we were going to lose Jonathan Gonzalez to Mexico, and it was the guy hasn't even panned out, so there's a lot. I'll say this from a player perspective, your career is so short. Mm-hmm. And if you think an opportunity to explore a certain path, and that's what you think is best for you and your family at that time, or going forward, whatever. I am all in support. If you have a chance and you're super talented, you want to play for the U.S., we are homers. We'll admit our bias and we'll say, yes, we want you to play for the U.S. because it's only going to strengthen our player pool. However, if you personally, like Esmir, wants to have a better chance to go play for Bosnia, dude, I wish you the best of luck. The road is going to be hard no matter what. There's no grass isn't necessarily greener. You still have to go out there and perform. And this kind of gets me to the point of, I remember when Jurgen Klinsmann started to broaden the player pool, right? And he brought in Fabian Johnson and he brought in Jermaine Jones, and we were kind of looking outside areas to go find dual nationals. And I remember there were some players, I'll leave nameless, that were frustrated, American players who were frustrated that the player pool was being broadened. And I said, listen, just play better. Like if you want to get on the national team, the better the competition is, the better you're going to be, the better our team will be because of it. So just play better. And that's, I'm kind of going off on a rant here now, Chuck, but
no,
sometimes but when we get criticized, oh, dude, you're talking your shit on your podcast and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, then play better. Just play better. If you don't want us to talk about you, then do what we know you're capable of. That's it.
Ooh,
yeah, you're going to have you can have drop-offs for sure. We'll take all that into consideration. But there are times where we know that you're capable of playing better, then play better. You want to be in the national team, play better. That's something you have control over as a player. Your attitude and your performance. Then just be awesome at those two things, and then we'll get off your back. But also, I don't mind dual nationals coming in. I don't care where we go recruit. If they have a chance to play for us and they're good, bring them in. That's only going to.
I 100% agree with you.
Yeah, so I don't. When people feel threatened by that, then what? Yeah. What are we doing? That's what you want to do. You want to cut your teeth against the best.
I'll always go back to Jermaine Jones. are you telling me you wouldn't want Jermaine Jones on your team? Because you hear people say, well, I go back to what Landon said about all the Germans coming over. And he didn't want to go into details, but he said for the most part, there were some guys who just couldn't care less about representing our country, right, and playing in the World Cup. But I said, you could say that, but Jermaine Jones played with his heart, and he gave everything for the U.S. men's national team. And we were better because we had Jermaine Jones. He was fantastic. So I don't want to hear he's the exception. No, that's not how it works.
No. He's not the exception. Listen, Ernie Stewart, Tab Ramos, Thomas Dooley, Hugo Perez, Jermaine Jones, Pablo Mastroianni, Fernando Clavijo, Fabian Johnson, Jedi Robinson, all foreign-based or Americans born somewhere else that have 50 or more caps for our U.S. men's national team. All were impactful and continue to be impactful for our national team. And our national team's better because they played for the red, white, and blue, or continue to do that. All right, we're going to take our first break. Call it what you want. When we come back, I don't even know what's next because I forgot to read what's coming. It's going to be fun.
That's the best part.
That's the best part. Just going to roll the dice and see what happens. Don't go
average to good, baby.
Average to good.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale. Ronaldo. Wonderful goal.
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Okay, welcome back into your average to goodness. Call it what you want. I'm Jimmy alongside Chuck, and we're going to do weekend preview because, as we mentioned before, this is the last weekend before the roster drops. So maybe the bubble players that are like, Mauricio Pochettino maybe has, Chuck. I'm going to say maybe 2 or 3. How do they perform? Or guys got to be ready. If somebody gets hurt, then who's the next man up in their minds, right? So yeah, I guess if I was on the bubble or if I just got called in, I'm sure the players know already if they got called in or not. They'd have to know at this point, or will they find out? I don't know. I can't remember how that works. But I would say that if you know you're in, you're tap dancing, baby. You're playing 1 or 2 touch because you don't want to get hurt. You want to make sure you're ready to go for this. So here are the notable fixtures for this upcoming weekend. We got Chivas versus Club America. Whoa, that's a big one. The biggest derby in Mexico. The 2 most successful teams in the history of Liga MX. Coventry taking on Stoke. So Haji Wright, will he start for Frank Lampard, who are on fire right now? Probably not. He's still coming back from injury, but we'll see. Then Tottenham versus Bournemouth. Can Tyler Adams roll out another 90 minutes against Spurs? We don't know which version of Spurs is going to show up. And then Real Betis against Las Palmas. Now, Betis is playing today in the Europa League. We're, again, recording this prior to their game against Vitoria in the Conference League. So we'll have to wait and see how that goes. And then you have Juve taking on Atalanta. That is a very, very big one. And we'll see where Weston McKennie starts in this one if Tim Weah is continuing to roll out on the right back position. So when you think about areas of need, Chuck, outside of the core group, who else do you think can push into this roster? Have we kind of explored every option? Are we pretty set? I mean, remember when you challenged me kind of off the cuff and I named 17 players, and I think we all kind of agreed those 17 players will be on the team, but there's still room, right, for a couple more.
Well, the striker position, certainly.
Striker,
right?
Yeah, we discussed that already. Mm-hmm.
Striker, for sure. Feels like midfield is pretty much set. That's our deepest player, our position for players in this pool is midfield. I mean, you have so many players who are making an impact, who are playing, who have a lot of quality. So it's going to be hard enough to pick 3, right? Because your starting 11 is going to be difficult depending on who plays right wing and who plays left wing. But ultimately, the midfield is going to be probably the most difficult because you have a lot of players there. Center back, you could kind of if you're throwing in. We don't know about Austin Trusty, right? Where he is.
So he had a head injury. Mm-hmm. Apparently, he came out with a head injury. So obviously, those can get tricky in terms of your recovery. But let's say he's out 10 to 14 days. I guess that's protocol, right, for concussion-related stuff. So that could rule him out, frankly. Yeah, which is unfortunate for him. But nothing's been determined. I haven't seen any other documentation on that other than he had a head injury.
But, you got Noahkai Banks possibly coming in, but Mark McKenzie, Chris Richards, those are your top 2, right? Then you have Tim Ream, and then that's where
would you bring in Cameron Carter-Vickers? He's on the fence, right?
Yeah, at this point, if Trusty can't go, then yeah, probably because he's been playing. Then right back, left back, Joe Scally seems like a certain inclusion, and so
yeah, he hasn't done anything to.
Anthony Ream, obvious,
Anthony Ream, is that a new player? Like a
Anthony
Tim Ream Jedi, Jedi Ream.
Yeah, Jedi.
All right,
Ream.
so let's talk about this then. If we're talking about players who are in form, and I'm kind of curious about your thoughts because we're getting to a point now with our national team, which is a good thing, where you can be playing in the Champions League, you can be playing at a big club, but that doesn't necessarily warrant or give you a guarantee that you're going to be called in with the national team. And I think that's a healthy sign for our national team overall. But let's talk about current form because we have a player. I'm going to leave his name out of this for right now. I'm just going to say that
beautiful.
He is considered the best player in his respective league right now. He's got 5 goals and 4 assists in his league.
Mm-hmm.
He's tied on 9 goal contributions. Okay. And he's with 2 other players early on in this league. So now I'm kind of giving away some clues. But he's had 2 fewer games to do that. If we had a player playing in a league that was crushing it right there, in the past, that would be an automatic call-in. But now, maybe because the league isn't as strong as some of the other ones, or that's how it's considered. But we've seen players make World Cup rosters from this league because they went on a tear and scored a whole bunch of goals. Okay, yep. So the player that I'm talking about currently is Alejandro Zendejas for Club America, and the player that I was seeing who scored a whole bunch of goals and made a World Cup roster was Herculez Gomez. Now before we get into the strength of Liga MX from when Herc was playing to now, which I think is a conversation to have, do you think, given current form for Alejandro Zendejas, that he deserves to get called in? Because if I was him, like, what else do I have to do to get a call in? Like it, I can hang with the national team. He hasn't made the most of his opportunities, so we can say that. But what else does a player have to do other than being on absolute fire? Does he have to do it for a goddamn year before he gets called in? I mean, they already know what he's about.
Yeah, I think given his production and what he's been able to do with Club America over the past year, he absolutely deserves, especially recently, right? We're talking about, does he deserve to get called into this camp? Absolutely. The thing is with Zendejas, and this happens to players, is you might perform at the club level to warrant a call-up, but that doesn't mean it translates. He has the quality, but doesn't mean it translates to the team and the fit and the tactical, whatever the tactical advantages that the U.S. men's national team have over most opponents in the attacking third. For whatever reason, it just hasn't worked with him. That's not to say that it can't work with him, right? So does he warrant a call-up? Yes.
Well, okay, yes, he does warrant a call-up. I agree with you. And I think it'd be a crazy precedent in some ways that if somebody was that on fire, be like, nah, we're good. we're gonna go with somebody that doesn't play much for their team in Europe. It'd just be like, what? So he did. Zendejas did come on. Remember when there was a friendly in Mexico and Pochettino's first away game? We lost that one, but I thought he was one of the bright spots. He came off the bench. And Vasquez falls into this too. Brandon Vasquez came off the bench as well, and all of a sudden you saw a little bit something. And Zendejas was the only one that was like up for the fight, right? He was getting people's faces, he was making tackles. Like, sweet, that's what I want to see when not only when you come off the bench, and anytime you play Mexico in particular.
Yeah, I mean, we know that Pochettino will be impressed with that. Just the same way that you look at certain players, you go, oh, all right, this guy. He's definitely going to get another look because the way Pochettino talks about him, and I think it's going to be difficult for him to play, especially if he's
even if he gets
competing
called
with
in.
Yunus Musa or Timothy Weah. But because he offers you something different and he's performing at the club level, I think he's gonna get called in. Remember how Pochettino talked about Diego Luna and having that busted nose and still willing to go and fight and make a difference.
Right.
That's something that you talk about first impressions, that sticks with a coach.
Yeah.
So that's another player that I think could potentially get called in just because of that, because he showed, I'll do whatever it takes to fight for my country. And that's the kind of guys Pochettino wants in the locker room. So in all, I guess after all that, I'll say Zendejas definitely deserves to get called in. He just hasn't showed well yet with the U.S. men's national team, and that doesn't mean he can't in the future, but he hasn't yet.
There was a good comment that flashed on the screen, and I can't remember who it was, so producer Des can pop it back up when I reference it. And it was with regard to Zendejas has earned one more chance. And I like that thought because
couldn't agree more.
That feels very true. Like, okay, you're doing it for your club. You're probably playing as well as you ever have in his career, right? We're catching you at your peak. We're going to bring you back in one more time, because if he can't maximize that opportunity one more time, then you're like, okay, we can turn the page on Zendejas. But this could be it. And listen, we've played enough, Chuck, that whether it was us in our own careers or with other players, you kind of knew that this was going to be their last chance in a particular camp. It was kind of a now or never. Some players rose to that challenge and some did not, right? And that even extended to players that had a long career with the national team. Like, man, if they're not sharp here, this could be it, and we've seen it.
I think there's important context here too, right? I look at myself. It took me 3-4 camps, probably 4,
to get comfortable.
And I'd say I didn't perform well in most of those appearances until it wasn't until the Nations League, the Confederations Cup, that it clicked for me. But my club form kept getting me call-ups, and Bob probably saw, okay, there's something different about me. I'm going to keep giving him call-ups and hopefully he catches up. I don't know how many call-ups I had left if I didn't perform, right? But I was young. Zendejas is 27. See, there's a difference between a young player coming in and you're giving him opportunities, and he's performing at the club level, probably earning another move to a bigger league, bigger club in Europe, versus someone who's 27 playing in Liga MX, and you're giving him opportunities and it hasn't worked out yet, right? So the leash is much shorter, is what I guess what you're saying as well.
All right, so we did a poll, and 79% are in favor of having Zendejas get called in. All right, we like that. Good positivity in our polls and in the chat now.
I like this chat. I like this group.
Let's go to what I had mentioned before. I'm going to call back a theme and question that I wanted to talk about as it pertained to Herculez Gomez 15 years ago versus Zendejas in Liga MX right now. Before we started the show, you and I were discussing, Chuck, I'm going to throw you under the bus a little bit here, that maybe Liga MX wasn't as strong as it used to be. And I think there are a lot of signs and markers that it isn't. Now, always when I think about Liga MX, I think about how it compares to MLS. And MLS is growing, and Liga MX feels like they've turned into more a couple teams that are the superpowers of the league, and everything else is maybe feels like there's more of a drop-off, right? The kind of haves and have-nots. Whereas before, I remember if we go down to play like a Toluca or Necaxa, that was a good game, and they had some good players. And not to say that they don't still have that, but it doesn't feel like they carry the same weight as they once was. I'm using those two clubs as examples, but I think they're not necessarily isolated to those two. And when I think about maybe the fear factor, if a Monterrey or a Club America or Tigres now rolls into town, if you're playing in Leagues Cup or Concacaf Champions Cup, it's not as, I don't know, they don't seem to have the same gravitas as they once had. And this is a shift over the last couple of years. Are you feeling the same way? Do you see that Liga MX is nowhere near as strong? And I think that's impacting their national team as well.
Well, I think there's two things here. MLS is getting stronger, and Liga MX is getting weaker in the process, because the players that are going to MLS used to be going to Liga MX, especially the South American talent. Whether it's the young talent coming in and they don't get their move to Europe, so they go to Liga MX, they make more money, and then they make the move, or it's the more established players in South America that are coming to MLS instead of going to Liga MX. So the talent pool that they're getting in Liga MX, I think, is lower, has dropped off, and now MLS is getting stronger. So it doesn't feel like it used to feel when you watch Liga MX and go, oh, there's some top talent there. You know, you look at some of the players, you say, oh, they'd be starring in MLS. Now it's not so much. Now you have MLS teams buying some of the best players in Liga MX. That never happened before. So that's when I look at the stats for Liga MX. Henry Martin, who we know very well from the L3 from the Mexican national team. Alexis Vega, we know very well from the Mexican national team. Henry Martin has nine assists as well as Zendejas. They both have 9 assists. And then Alexis Vega has 8 assists. Now, what's crazy is Henry Martin and Zendejas, both on the same club, have 9 assists. Alvaro Vidalgo and Brian Rodriguez, who was also an MLS player at LAFC, they also have 8 assists. So you have 4 players on your club with 8 assists or more. That doesn't happen. That doesn't even seem real to me.
Right.
You know? So I don't want that to – I'm not trying to take away what Zendejas has done because he's performed
It sounds
well.
like it.
It's one of the biggest clubs. No, the pressure doesn't change for one of the biggest clubs in North America. So he absolutely has deserved to get a call in. And I would say the same with Ledesma. When I look at what he's done, his body of work at PSV, how the hell is he not on at least the preliminary roster?
Yeah. Ledesma
Richie Ledesma has absolutely deserved to deserve a look, right?
Well, Javier Aguirre, the coach for Mexico, said this. I spoke with Richard Ledesma. He will have to make his decision. He has a possibility of being Mexican. I didn't put him on the list of 60 because at the moment I wasn't so clear about him. And obviously from a Mauricio Pochettino perspective, what he said in the past, I don't need to convince a player to want to play for the U.S. So Richard Ledesma is not on either 60-man preliminary roster for either the U.S. or Mexico. So that the guy just has to make a decision. So here's what I'll say very, very quickly about Liga MX. They despite the drop-off, which feels pretty real, they still dominate CONCACAF Champions Cup. A Mexican team. Now this has been going on since I believe 1962, some form of the CONCACAF Champions Cup. Okay, whether it was called that or the CONCACAF Champions League or whatever it was. Okay, Mexican teams have won it, Chuck, 39 times and have been runners-up 20 times.
They've absolutely dominated it.
So since 1962, Mexico have won it 39 times and been runners. 59 times they've had a team in the final, either winning it or just being in the final. The U.S. have had three winners since 1962, 5 runners up, so only 8. 8 versus 59. Yeah, so
it's history.
And Canada has no titles and has 2 runners up. So from a North American perspective,
Montreal and TFC, are those the 2 runner up? Montreal and TFC?
Yes, Montreal in 2014, 2015, and Toronto 2018. Yeah, DC United, 1998, LA Galaxy won it in 2000, and then the Sounders won it in 2022. So
the Sounders changed everything.
Well,
Club World Cup.
Well, they're in the Club World Cup. Yeah, that makes a big difference. But there still needs to be a consistency, I think, from an MLS perspective before that perception really starts to shift harder to what MLS and Canada and US are doing in terms of teams. Big conversation to have, but obviously good news for MLS. And I loved your point, Chuck, that you made about more players seeing MLS as a destination over Mexico. I think that is definitely shifting the narrative as well. All right, we're taking our last break and call it what you want. When we come back, we got some stories to talk about, including Serie A, exploring, coming to play some games in the U.S. How does everybody feel about that? Paulo Fonseca, Tanner Tessman's coach at Lyon, getting a 9-month ban for almost headbutting a ref in France. Yeah, lots to talk about, and it should be fun because that's what we do here on your favorite Average to Good podcast. Don't go anywhere.
Yeah, we always find our way back home.
Ooh, more call it what you want time on this Thursday. We have a new start time for everybody. We're going 10 a.m. Eastern on Tuesdays and Thursdays moving forward. Though next week, some emergency podcasts might be dropping. I know I'm just teasing it, Chuck, because
while I'm on vacation,
a roster drop. What? How many vacations do you take a year? I feel like it's over 5. Can anybody confirm with me in the chat right now? It feels like it's over under is 5, and I think the under would be 4 if it is under 4.
Well, there's a difference between trips
always
and
on vacation.
No, there's a difference between vacation and trips, right? So this is a vacation. I'm going to St. John on a family vacation, and then we're going to Montana, family vacation.
What? 2 locations. Those are 2.
I'm going to a Dave Matthews concert, by the way.
Whoa. That's a
Also,
throwback.
I ran into a listener who told me, you guys stared me in the wrong direction for Punk. I should have went with Rancid. That Rancid is the band of choice for Punk. For anyone who's like coming into it, Rancid would have been the right choice.
That's true. There might have been a better gateway drug for you to get into Punk.
Yeah. See,
I don't.
Come on, guys.
I love Rancid. Yeah, we went like we Dead Kennedys. It's what's funny is of all the recommendations we gave you, Dead Kennedys was probably not the best one for you to choose first. Not the best.
Come on, Dez. Dez said, "Let's give him the most aggressive Punk."
But you mentioned Dave Matthews Band. It's funny that the Punk pushed you over to Dave Matthews, because I know Dave Matthews is pretty much the opposite of punk rock.
Yeah, I have some friends, and they had invited us to Montana, and then the Dave Matthews Band is concert is that weekend. So my wife loves Dave Matthews, so I kind of got pushed in. So now I'm like, yeah, let's go, dude.
Yeah, I had a girlfriend that loved Dave Matthews back in the day, and I went to show after show after show, and the guy put on a great live performance.
Okay.
Well, I liked it because she liked it. Is that an acceptable answer?
It's a small venue too, so it should be
crash into
pretty
me,
cool.
Babe. Yeah, I mean, I got you remember some of the words from Dave Matthews, but yeah, small venue, Dave Matthews. It's going to be a good show, so I'm excited for you, Chuck. One of my favorite bands, actually, Block Party, is coming to the Bay Area in June, and I'm really looking forward to it. Shout out to Block Party, and for everybody that listens to Block Party. Anyway,
hey, I gotta say, I've never heard this. I never heard this before, Jimmy. Chuck gonna be the only raisin in the rice for sure. I've never heard that terminology before. The only raisin in the rice. Oh man, some of these comments. Woo, got me dying.
Let's get into the news. In case you missed it, news here on Call It What You Want. As I teased, Serie A is exploring the opportunity to bring games to the United States. What are your thoughts on foreign leagues, specifically top 5 leagues, because it's been talked about, and Champions League games being played on American soil? Real games, not friendlies, where they're fleecing Americans to overpay to watch people walk around for preseason games, which don't get me, I get triggered about that in general, but a real game. Listen, personally, I'm fired up to see Empoli Genoa, 2 mid-table teams, because there's no way they're going to have Milan or Inter or you like a
yeah. No, I want to see that in Cincinnati and see how that pops off.
Where they're charging $250 per ticket.
Yeah, no. Cagliari versus Torino in Kansas City. Don't miss this now.
Don't miss it.
No,
it's gonna be a 0-0, baby. Catenaccio at its finest.
I'd feel for the hardworking Italian people who are
live in the States
in their city saying no in Italy, going, where the hell is my club? I pay season tickets to watch my club, unless they're flying the supporters over to watch them play in the United States. I feel for them, because we all know in Europe, it's a religion. People live, eat, breathe, sleep the club. Listen, and so they're not. It's taking away from them. But from the league standpoint, I understand it's marketing, it's more money, growth. It's growth. So
visibility.
I understand both sides.
I do. And I think that they reference when they've been talking about it. Hey, the NFL does it. They try to, they come over to Europe, and those are wildly successful. And the NBA has games elsewhere. When I think about the NFL in particular, NFL is the only professional league in the world, right? That's playing at that level, right? The NFL is the NFL, and everything else is a way, way, way distant second. So I get why they want to potentially spread their wings in other countries and to, spread the gospel of the NFL. But we already have our own domestic league here. And we have, it's not like, I guess the game has changed in terms of how accessible in terms of watching it on television. We can watch so many leagues here as an American. We probably have more access to leagues around the world than anybody else when you're traveling, right? I remember anytime you travel, you're like, oh, I'm going to watch the local Serie A game if I'm in Italy, and it's behind a paywall, or it's just not that easy, right, to see it. Whereas the NFL has always made it pretty easy. No, obviously that's changing with the streaming wars or whatever, but it just, I don't know, it just feels different. when you think about NFL and NBA and how they compare to other leagues. I don't know. I can understand what you're saying, Chuck, and from a business standpoint, it makes a lot of sense in terms of, again, growth and visibility. But if I was a diehard Serie A fan, or if one of my teams went over to America to play a game instead of playing in front of us, if I was the home team in that game and we lose a home game because they're going over to America, I would be pissed.
What if you saw San Jose Earthquakes, Kansas City, Sporting Kansas City playing in Scotland you know,
well, you know what? I would have plenty of time for that because I just want to see how the Scottish people respond to having two MLS teams go over and play in their land. I don't know. That would be actually pretty hilarious. And I wonder how the Scottish people would respond to that. Now, I would love to see those two teams play against other Scottish teams in a real competition because, you know, there's obviously conversation about which league is better, blah, 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 blah. So anyway. Okay, another news. Flo Balogun returns to training. It looked like he had big smiles yesterday. This is great news, Chuck. Obviously, we're not going to see him in the Nations League, but Flo Balogun, I want to see him for the Gold Cup, right? You got to bring him in. If he's available and healthy for the Gold Cup, you bring him in, right? I know that there's a conversation to be had about giving guys rest over the summer, but he already had his rest. He's been hurt.
No, you bring him in.
No more rest for Flo Balogun. He's got to go 100 miles an hour for the next 16 months.
Massive season for him. But also at the same time, Jimmy, given how important club football is for each player heading into next season before a World Cup, you also don't want to cut into preseason time. Preseason for a lot of managers is where they set their principles. They kind of set the 11 that they have in their mind. At least you're given that opportunity if you're in that 11. If you miss preseason, that's detrimental because you're starting on the back foot, and that's the last thing you want to do in with such an important season. So if Monaco said, hey, they've actually struggled in front of goal without Balogun, and they say, hey, we need you here at preseason. We need to work a lot of things out and figure out how we're playing and how you fit into it. You need to be here, and for him not to be there, that wouldn't be a good look.
Yeah, no, that's true. I like that point. Another player coming back into the fold, Serginho Dest, is expected to be on the bench for PSV this weekend. Holy crap. Fasten your seatbelts.
What a comeback.
That is a big deal. Yeah, it does take time. And for him to be worked his way back into the bench is exciting. I don't know if that's going to guarantee any minutes. If that's probably the next step, a little bit of here, like a little taste, and work his way back into the team. Probably not good news for Richie Ledesma, who's been holding it down in his spot since he's been hurt. But, well, we'll wait and see. Still plenty of time for that to play out. Okay, moving on to the next one. Paulo Fonseca, who, for those that need to get caught up on this name, he started the season coaching AC Milan and for all intents and purposes, got the best out of Christian Pulisic. I mean, the guy was on fire playing for Fonseca and is less on fire playing for Sergio Conceição. Fonseca gets sacked. Okay. And then he surprisingly gets hired pretty quickly by Lyon. And now he's been in charge for 4 games, I believe, Chuck. And at the end of a game for Lyon against Brest, they were up 2-1. There was a penalty that was called and VAR was checking it, or a penalty was being looked at against his team at the very end. He just lost his mind. And before the ref could even give his ruling, I think he thought the penalty was going to be called in favor of Brest, and actually it wasn't. It was going to be called not a penalty. He got into the referee's face, got a red card, and the referee did mention he hit his nose, but he thought he was going to headbutt him, didn't end up going through with it. He gets a 9-month ban. A 9-month ban for this behavior. That seems pretty harsh. Now
he had to be made the example. That's why.
Yeah, this is so. I have some context here, or some previous history. Not since Paris Saint-Germain's, PSG's then sporting director Leonardo, who was handed a 13-month ban for barging into a match official at the Parc des Princes in the tunnel of May 2013, has a French club official been so severely reprimanded for an incident involving a ref. Now Leonardo's ban did end up being overturned 5 months later, but he had already left the club. And so I wonder what this means for Fonseca, referee. There's a lot of issues around French refereeing. I don't know if you saw the Marseille president who came out and said all the referees are corrupt when they lost 3-0. Marseille lost 3-0 to Auxerre. And he got, I think, a 13-match ban. I'm looking it up right now.
I think they'll appeal this 9 months, and you
they'll appeal it.
Yeah,
sure, but
there'll be a ban because he has to be made the example.
Right. This is a big issue, I think, with referees in general. I mean, it's getting pretty out of control. And if you're going to set these precedences, I don't know. If you're going to set a precedent, it has to begin at the beginning of the year. Like, if you really want to negate abuse, or if any player steps towards you, I know, listen, it's an emotional game, and emotions are going to happen
in the beginning of the year.
Well, yeah, for Fonseca, but just in terms of like, hey, this is, you have to call it right when you see it, and you have to be consistent with those calls. Like, you can't let it slip from game to game. That's where shit gets crazy. And that's where we get frustrated in game. Like, wait, you're going to call that a foul now, but before you didn't call that same exact play?
That's always happened, though, Jimmy.
I get it. And that's the human element part of the game.
That's part of the game, and you have to learn to control your emotions. I mean, it starts when you're 7 years old, and you want to lash out. From then, as a professional, it remains the same. Whether the call is for you, against you, that's what I don't understand. If you're a coach, you're supposed to be the guy that everyone looks to in those type of situations to bring level-headedness, right? To bring that calm to a situation like that, to make your players go, look, guys, I'll lead by example and show you this is how you handle refs going against you, because that's part of the game. And I think he was probably looking at his career in that one moment of how it was spiraling, out of control. And if he continues down this path, then he's not going to really have too many opportunities. So he probably just lashed out. It was one of those moments where the moment got the best of him.
Well, Lyon's American owner, John Texter, said on Instagram, "I stand with you today and always," with regard to Fonseca. He said, "You made a mistake. Your apology was sincere, and your punishment is clearly too severe. You were the right man for OL. We shall persevere." So it looks like they're standing behind their guy. I agree with you that ultimately they will lessen this 9-month ban.
3 to 6,
maybe 3, maybe.
Yeah.
So how does this now impact Tanner Tessman? Because Fonseca, clearly fond of Americans, gave a lot of minutes to Yunus Musa. Christian Pulisic became his guy and got a lot out of Christian. He was his penalty kick taker, right? And just lost a little bit of control, I think, in terms of managing certain personalities within that group, which was ultimately his downfall. And now we can argue that Fonseca was a better fit for Milan than Conceição is at the particular moment, sliding doors moment, potentially. And now Tessman got 4 consecutive starts in under Fonseca.
And has been playing well.
He has been really solid and really good. And I think that will obviously get Tessman into the Nations League, as it should.
Jimmy, Rafa Cardenas said, "Man, I love the show. Rafa, you better be in LA. When we're live and we're there on site.
Yes, you can trigger Chuck in person." I'm gonna fly down to LA myself to try to trigger Chuck in person. You should be doing
trigger
this.
You. There's nobody better than triggering you. Ibis is pretty good because Ibis went off, and when Ibis goes off, he goes off. But I love when you and Tony get triggered. There's not too actually when Tony, because Tony always tries to play calm and cool.
Yeah, super cool.
But when he gets triggered, he gets triggered. So that's probably my favorite when he gets triggered.
We might have to. This might be a blanket statement. We might have to be cool on triggering. We don't want to get Tony's blood up.
Oh, true.
Doctor's orders.
Too soon, Jimmy.
We can't trigger Tony. Doctor's orders. Or just be real.
All right, so just Jimmy. We'll just trigger Jimmy.
Just me.
Right,
let's. We got to get Tones' his fitness back up, and then we can get back into trigger territory. But yes, you got to come back and join us. And Rafa, thank you for the kind words. All right, let's talk a little bit of Champions Cup. We obviously talked about the competition a little bit earlier, but we have some leg ones that got completed. Were you surprised? LAFC beat Columbus Crew 3-0.
Yeah.
And then FC Cincinnati 1-1 versus Tigres. Yeah. Galaxy lost 1-0.
Buonga went off.
Buonga was very good. Like peak Buonga.
What about Whitecaps Monterrey?
Yeah, 1-1.
Whitecaps have
Whitecaps been good.
Performing well. Obviously, it's different when you play at home against Vancouver. It's very tough to play in Vancouver, but that's a great result. Great result.
So I'll just rip through the scores. FC Cincinnati Tigres 1-1 after leg 1. Pumas Alajuelense 2-0 in favor of Pumas. LAFC 3-0 Columbus Crew. Going back to Columbus for leg 2 next week. That's a lot of work for the Crew. I don't know if they can overcome that. Chivas 1-0 over Club America in leg 1. Herediano 1-0 over the Galaxy. Galaxy, what's going on with the former or the current reigning MLS Cup champs? That salary cap moves just, I think, hurt them a lot. And then Painsel's hurt. Ricky Puch is hurt. That doesn't help either. Seattle Sounders 0-0 Cruz Azul. And Vancouver and Monterrey 1-1. Inter Miami plays Cavalier tonight on FS2 at 8 p.m. Eastern. Who you feeling like an MLS team's going to make a good run in this one? Do you think MLS? Who we riding our hopes on at this point? I guess it's LAFC. Whoever comes out of LAFC Columbus.
Everybody jumping in that LAFC. Why do they have to play each other?
I know.
No, I think LAFC. That's where the hope is right now, because the Galaxy, I would have said if Ricky Puch was healthy, but he's not. He's not going to be healthy until probably middle of the year. Yeah. And they didn't replace Joveljic. So that's maybe coming in the summer, because it's a big destination. If you go to any European that's looking to come to MLS, you say, hey, LA Galaxy is looking for you, and you're a big name. They can handle a big name, big salary. That's usually the team that you're going to go to if it's not Inter Miami, right? So I think LAFC and Inter Miami are the two teams that you're looking at to make a strong run.
Yeah, it's what's interesting. FC Cincinnati have to go down to Mexico to play Tigres. Vancouver have to go down to play Monterrey in leg 2. The Galaxy get a home game, so I think they can turn that around against Herediano and should. Sounders have to go down to Mexico to play Cruz Azul. Those are tough games. So maybe Inter Miami would be another one. That LAFC and Inter Miami. So yeah, we'll see. And then you obviously have the draw. This is just the round of 16 quarterfinal. There's still a lot of work to do. And I'm a little nervous that we're not going to add to that Concacaf Champions Cup haul from an MLS perspective, but we'll wait and see. That's why we play the games. All right, that's it. We're calling it a show. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for your support. Congrats again to everybody for triggering Ivis. We really appreciate that. It's
yes, well done, chat.
Well done.
Much love to you guys.
Our next show will be next Tuesday. Well, could be. We might have an emergency podcast, so turn on your notifications here on the Gloss America YouTube channel, because once the U.S. men's national team roster drops, we are going live. So be ready for that.
I'll be live from St. John.
Where that happens, we're not so sure. Yes, Chuck are going to be hanging out, sipping Mai Tais on our next show. But just for standard, normal programming, Tuesday, the next one is 10 a.m. Eastern, and Big Tones will be back with us. So we're excited for that.
Oh, Big Tones is back.
Big Tones. We miss you, buddy. And we miss everybody else, because we're not going to talk to you for a couple days. But we'll be back on the other side of the weekend. Enjoy it. We'll see you soon. Later.
See you soon, guys.